Hello, RWorld. Welcome back to another episode of RWorldTalk. Happy to have Miss Kim Hansen, our Chief Operating Officer for RWorld, with us this morning. We have some really important information to go over to get you guys all up to speed on all the changes that are happening in the industry. We've received tons of phone calls. We're doing lots of work for you guys in order to get this information out the best way that we can. But please, share this podcast with everybody that you know to try and get this information out to as many Realtor members as you possibly can so that we can get everybody up to speed and get us all on the same page. And with that, welcome, Miss Kim Hansen.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning. Happy to be here. A lot going on.
There is a lot going on.
Yeah, looking forward to talking about it and sharing what BeachesMLS is doing.
Okay, well, let's get right into it. I know that inquiring minds want to know exactly what's going on. So why don't you give us a brief background on how the MLS changes have come into play and sort of what's evolved over time, because things continually change, it seems, almost every day.
They do. Yeah, indeed. Every day we seem to be getting new information and, if nothing else, new interpretations of the information. Right. So just kind of going back a little bit, in 2019, we saw some class action antitrust lawsuits being filed against NAR and franchise brokers in the industry. At that point, we really knew that there was the potential for things to change significantly. I don't think we really knew to the degree that things could change, but we understood that it was something that we had not seen before.
Correct.
I think the nature of class action lawsuits, all lawsuits, is that they take a while to kind of percolate. But in 2023, we saw settlements being proposed by some of those big franchise brokers. And we also saw at the end of 2023, October 31st to be exact, one of those big lawsuits, the Sitzersettlement / NAR and the other defendants, went to trial. And the jury deliberated for 2.5 hours. They came back in favor of the plaintiffs and ultimately awarded $1.78 billion damages.
Seemed like way too short of a period of time for them to have deliberation of that magnitude.
It does. It was a jury of 8, and literally in 2.5 hours, they came back and just boom, guilty on all charges. So with that, the nature of the antitrust lawsuits is automatically triple damages.
Right.
So 1.78 billion turns into 5.4 billion very, very quickly.
Right.
Everybody really recognized that this was going to be potentially catastrophic to the industry. And in 2023, we started to see also a series of proposed settlements. Some of those were before the judgment came down, and some of those were after the judgment came down. In 2024, NAR came to the table with a proposed settlement between the plaintiffs and NAR.
Right.
And so we are now focusing on making certain that BeachesMLS and our members are compliant with the terms of the settlement, because it's important. It's how people are going to stay out of trouble, both on the historic actions and, quite frankly, on the future actions.
Right.
Because another issue that we saw was a whole series, I'm going to say 25 plus copycat lawsuits being filed.
How easy is it for someone to file one of those copycat lawsuits? Because I remember all of the work that we were putting into our scenario planning when thinking about what could potentially be the outcome of the lawsuit at the time. And then all of a sudden there were other lawsuits being filed and now copycats. And it seemed they were coming out so fast and they all mirrored each other. Is it really easy for someone to file one of those copycat lawsuits?
So it really is. It really is, because the nature of the lawsuits is it's public record.
Right.
And so what happened was it appeared, and we really did suspect before the trial came to head on the Sitzer trial with NAR, before that came to head, we all kind of assumed that there was a number of copycat lawsuits that were baked, sitting in a drawer. Depending on how that trial turned out, they were going to be filed. And indeed, that is what happened.
And it's literally just photocopying. And
it literally is. That's exactly right. It's like, and in some cases, they didn't even change the names correctly.
Right.
Forgot to left the name in there. So, but nevertheless, it was a whole series in all different states.
Okay. So you had mentioned NAR came forth with a proposed settlement. Why don't we get into that a little bit so that way we've got a clearer picture of where we are now and what were those terms of the settlement?
Okay. If you don't mind, I'm going to talk a little bit about what the accusations were.
Okay, yeah.
So the premise of the lawsuits was that the plaintiffs and the plaintiff's attorney took the position that by virtue of the MLS offering, one broker offering to compensate another broker in the transaction, that in summary, it was collusion between brokers and it was price fixing. So that was basically the premise, was an antitrust lawsuit of collusion and price fixing. A lot of different elements, but that really was what it boiled down to. The theory behind that was that when a buyer went to purchase a home, the commission was offered to pay the buyer's agent in the MLS, and the buyer actually did not negotiate their commission with the buyer's agent.
Okay.
I think the misperception in all of that is that you know more than anybody else because you're a practicing realtor, commissions are always negotiable, always have been negotiable. And whether you represent the seller or the buyer, you negotiate your commission throughout the entire transaction. It's not like it's a one and done. You talk about it and it never cycles back throughout the entire transaction.
I think that hits home for every one of our listeners that has had to purchase a refrigerator that broke the day before closing out of their commissions, or replace some flooring that came out of their commissions that they earned. There's so many things that happen in the course of a transaction where whatever that offer of commission was the day that you showed the property, I could say at least 50% of the time you get to the closing table and the amount of money that you earned is vastly different than the amount of money that was offered, because we want to make sure that everybody in that transaction is happy and they get to the closing table on time and make sure that that transaction actually does come to fruition. And we'll do whatever it takes in order to make sure that that happens. And sometimes you're buying a refrigerator out of your commission.
Absolutely. And I think that's really true. I think that you have an inspection and something is revealed that, there's a major problem with the air conditioner. They're not inexpensive. And so, somebody's going to have to pony up some of that. And I think at that point, I think that the buyer agent is typically very invested in their buyer. And they really want to see that buyer succeed in acquiring that property that really means a lot to them and their family. So, it's never a straight line.
No, it never is. We're always trying to assist that buyer or that buyer and their family to get to that closing table and realize the lifestyle that they hired us to help them find.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, okay, so let's talk about the key terms of that settlement. $418 million being paid out from NAR over the course of 4 years. What else are we looking at there?
We are looking at the MLS is prohibited from participating in the offer of compensation in any form or fashion. And so what that means is that while typically, historically, there was an offer of compensation when an agent entered their listing into the MLS, they offered to compensate the other agent. Brokers cooperated through the MLS. That is no longer going to be the case. And so it doesn't mean that brokers cannot continue to cooperate and a selling broker cannot compensate a buying broker. It means the offer cannot be in the MLS, and the MLS cannot participate in really anything that touches that offer.
Sure.
And so that was another one of the conditions of the settlement. I think
it's unfortunate. It throws a big wrench in our gears because we're the envy of every real estate market around the world. And now we're going to be offering or operating vastly different than the way that we always have.
It's funny because I think one of the things that supposedly the plaintiffs and their attorneys were looking for was more transparency and greater efficiency. And this is really kind of like put the kibosh on both of those to some degree.
Exactly.
I mean, because the transparency was when the offer was in the MLS and It was quite visible, right? Yeah. And I think the efficiency was when it was there. And if somebody wanted to purchase a home, then it was very easy for them to make that offer after working with their agent, understanding the terms and conditions of their offer.
Right.
And now there's a whole new element that needs to be negotiated and discussed through whatever means that's going to happen. I think we're not even exactly certain how all of that's going to transpire. We have a good sense of it. But agents are very resourceful, and they're going to find different ways to reach out to another broker and find out what the seller's goals are, and if the seller is receptive to cooperating in any form or fashion. So
sure. Yeah,
I don't think it increases efficiency.
No, definitely does not increase efficiency. And in my opinion, I think that really upsets the apple cart in the sense that you had a buyer who was ready, willing, and able to purchase the property that was being offered by the seller, and you could have this smooth transaction. And now you've got a lot of bumps in the road and hiccups that are going to happen with that transaction and through those negotiations, where you might have a seller that digs their heels in a little bit on something that it might not really be that big of a deal, and really hurt themselves, not understanding what the consequences of their actions are going to be. And now you might end up having a buyer who no longer can afford to purchase the property of their dreams after they've seen it if they can't negotiate that commission with the seller.
That's right. And I think especially, quite frankly, in your little bit lower income families, first-time home buyers, where people are working hard just to pull together the down payment on a home,
right,
let alone having to try to find the capital to come out of pocket to compensate their agent, which the agent is entitled to be compensated. I don't think any consumer or any reasonable person thinks that they're not. So it's more cumbersome now trying to find the means and the mechanisms to make that happen.
Yeah, and VA buyers. I mean, we traditionally have had VA buyers that have put zero money down and didn't have to come out of pocket a lot in order to get into the home of their dreams and provide for their families, shelter. And now I understand that the VA has changed the rules, saying, well, we're now going to allow the VA buyer in order to pay for commissions and have contributions to the sale, which this is just me, my personal opinion. I don't really think was the right road to go down. I think that VA buyers have really laid their lives on the line for our country and really should not have to be digging into their pocket in order to find shelter when they get back home.
Yeah.
That's just my personal opinion. So let's talk about the agreements now that we are now entering into with our buyers that in our market was not customary. In other parts of the country, buyer brokerage agreements or written buyer agreements have really been the norm. Northwest MLS has been doing it for a while, but here locally with Beaches, we haven't had a lot of experience with that. We're trying to train all of our agents in order how to use these forms, which forms they should use, and Florida Realtors has just been coming out with forms. It seems almost every week we get a new form or a couple. So now part of that settlement is that agents must enter into some sort of written agreement with their buyers in order to proceed through that transaction.
That's
correct?
Exactly right. And they must enter into an agreement with the buyer prior to showing homes, prior to or showing homes and or to representing that individual, right? Or that couple or whatever it is. So they must have some kind of a written agreement that documents the relationship between the parties. And
that written agreement must say that commissions are fully negotiable and are not set by law.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's exactly what it must say.
So let's talk about the new BeachesMLS field changes that have been, some have been added, some are staying, some are just changing slightly, but let's talk about our pre-sale field changes that come up in the add edit module when you're putting in a brand new listing.
Okay. Well, so first off, to just kind of give a date on the NAR settlement requires that the MLS not participate in the commission, the offer of compensation, as of August 17th.
Right.
BeachesMLS is going to make that change on August 13th. So we're doing it a little bit prior to the requirement. And we're doing that in case there is maybe a technology glitch and or to give our members an opportunity to if they're not quite clear on it, to maybe get up to speed. We're doing a ton of training, like you said earlier. So as of the 13th, that offer of compensation will not be in the MLS.
Right.
But what Beaches is doing is Beaches is adding a field to the add edit. So an agent enters a listing into the MLS, and there's now going to be a field that says negotiable seller concessions, yes, no. And it's a mandatory field. And so the agent is going to select whether or not the seller is receptive to having conversations about concessions, any concessions.
Sure.
And so it's to just indicate, to the consumers, to the other agents, whether or not seller is receptive.
And that your seller is willing to negotiate.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's a fantastic field. I love that we've added that. The key word is negotiable. And when we're talking about seller concessions, it's not just compensation. We're talking about maybe the seller is interested in offering a 3-2-1 rate buy down concession for that buyer in order to help them get into that property for a little bit of a cheaper monthly payment with a lower interest rate to start things off. Maybe that seller is willing to assist the buyer with a special assessment that maybe negotiated, and they're saying that they're willing to possibly pay that off. Things like that, which is fantastic to sort of let the crowd know, hey, we've got a seller that's willing to work with us and willing to negotiate some things over here. Bring me your buyers. Great field to have.
I will say, though, that I think that probably a best practice for a buyer agent is to, that certainly is a field that one can look at and give, some merit to. But at the end of the day, I think if I was representing a buyer, I think that whether or not that the listing said seller concession, yes, no, I would probably submit an offer on behalf of my buyer, with the terms that my buyer wanted. Because I do think that sometimes sellers think when they're putting their house on market, I have the very best house in the planet, which is a good thing. Home ownership pride is a lovely thing.
No, they never do that.
But I think with that, I think sometimes a seller doesn't even know what concessions they'll make until you actually get down to a written offer in front of you. And then, a seller looks at it and they may change their mind on whether or not they're going to make some type of concession. So working with a buyer, I think you want to take some, credence with that. But at the end of the day, I think represent your buyers.
Absolutely. Yeah, you never know who the listing agent, well, sometimes you do know who the listing agent is. But if that listing agent did not have a proper conversation with that seller in order to prep them for what's happening in the market, what needs to be done in order to move that property, you may have somebody who like you said, the seller just said, you know what, at this time, I'm not willing to budge because I think that this property is worth $1 million and that's all I'm taking.
Yep.
But you know what, after a couple of weeks on the market, you bring them an offer that has couple of concessions here, a couple little changes over here, and that seller goes, okay, you know what? We haven't had that much action on this property. Let's work with this buyer and get us to the closing table so I can get out of here and move on.
I think people's lives change. And, what you think one day is maybe different than what you think 2 or 3 weeks from now. And the market changes. Maybe there's more inventory, maybe there's less inventory, maybe days on market is longer or shorter or whatever. But it's a moving target. It always is.
Yeah, and that's why it's always good to put pen to paper. Because
absolutely.
Verbal offers, they don't stand up. And a lot of times, just a quick call to the seller, if they're not seeing something that is in front of them on paper, in writing, and all they have to do is sign on the dotted line and that sale is done. Not done, but they've
been moving in the right direction.
Under contract, certainly put pen to paper and make sure everything's in writing. Yeah. Never know what's going to happen. Let's talk about post-closing, when we're closing out the listings.
So when we're closing out the listings, we're going to have, again, 2 mandatory fields. One is seller concession, yes, no. And the other is buyer contribution, yes, no.
Okay.
And depending on the selection, if one selects seller concession, yes, then you're going to see a series of additional fields that the agent is going to want to choose from in closing out that listing.
Okay.
One of those is closing costs.
Yep.
And then closing costs is going to have like a little hover bubble that kind of explains what that is. And that's
tooltip.
A little tooltip, yeah. And that's really going to be like an inspection, title, doc stamp. Your commission would go under that.
Right. Compensation, property tax.
Yep, all of that
okay.
would fall under that. And then the additional selection boxes are home warranty.
Mm-hmm.
What else do we have?
The interest rate buy down.
Interest rate buy down, which is a big one. Special assessment. And then just kind of a general other selection. So, and at the bottom of those 2, after we've done our seller concession, buyer contribution, there's going to be a dollar amount, a numeric entry field that the agent is going to enter the total amounts of the concession or the contribution. So what we're doing is...
Just so they understand, that numeric entry field is strictly for a dollar amount that is not to be used for, and you wouldn't even be allowed to try to type in any sort of notes or anything in there.
Yep, numeric entry only. We blocked any text entry. Yep. So yeah, it's numeric entry. And the goal there is just to give a reasonable documentation of how the transaction played out,
sure.
Financially. Yeah.
Okay. And let's get into a couple of questions that I have to make sure that everybody's on the same page and we all understand what all of these changes mean. We talked about commissions and that the commission field is being removed from the MLS. So where you have now, there's going to be a percentage or a dollar amount. It's gone.
Gone.
We're never going to see it again.
Yep.
Completely gone.
Yep.
Okay. So in that case, I know that we're going to have people that are asking, can the commissions be put into the broker remarks?
No. The commission cannot be put anywhere that the MLS touches. And so that's going to be like a third-party software. I know we've had some people talk about, I'm going to kind of enter it in like one of the showing instruction platforms. Don't do it. We're going to see it. We're going to ultimately fine you. It actually is in breach of the settlement that Beaches signed. It's going to be in breach of what protects you in the settlement. So don't do it.
I think that's an important point to drive home, because every time we do make a change, the realtors hate when somebody moves the cheese on them. We make a change and everybody tries to figure out a clever little way that they're going to get around it. That is, guys, we are not playing around this time. We're talking about $5.4 billion in treble damages that the National Association and a heck of a lot of big brokers were sued for. NAR is spending $418 million over the course of the next 4 years in order to dig us out of this mess. There are no workarounds whatsoever, full stop, period. Commissions will not be anywhere that is in BeachesMLS, none of our fields, none of our brokers' remarks, none of our showing platforms, and it can't even be aggregated or offered outside of, we can't pull data from BeachesMLS and aggregate it onto a third-party website and create something in order to compile all of that commission data, because guess what's going to happen? Data feed's going to be pulled, your IDX feed is gone, you're fined, you're kicked out of the MLS. I mean,
right.
These things are so serious, and we have agreed with attorneys and the settlement and the federal court that we are not going to engage in things like that. So if you try to do these workarounds, we are going to warn you, send you to a legal class. Then if you continue doing that, you are going to be fined, because one person can ruin this for everyone.
And because I think at the end of the day, what agents really need to understand is that the protection that the settlement provides is really twofold. It's a clawback on the lawsuits that have already taken place. So we talked about those two big lawsuits in 2019 that were filed. We talked about the 25 plus copycat lawsuits on behalf of sellers. Those lawsuits the settlement includes those lawsuits.
Right.
More importantly, just as importantly, I should say, is it provides protection for future copycat lawsuits.
Correct.
So if somebody were to file a lawsuit next week, next year, 2 years from now, they're protected in this settlement only if they comply with the terms of the settlement.
Right.
And we have every reason to believe that what we're going to see is testers in the marketplace. We're going to see people that are calling our agents and they're acting as if they are a buyer or a seller, and they're asking questions that basically set somebody up to answer the question in a way that would be in breach of the settlement,
right.
In which case it really jeopardizes that person's protection under the settlement.
Right.
So the stakes are high on this. The stakes are very high on this.
You just brought up a great point with the testers in the marketplace. You actually may have people call you up and say, I want to see 123 Main Street. And you might have a realtor that says, come over to my office. We're going to sit down. We're going to do a buyer consultation. That tester may say, I'm not signing anything. All I want to do is just get into that house, show it to me real quick. And you could push back and say, I really need you to sign this. If that buyer absolutely refuses, and you decide to put them in your car and go and open up that door, you are now in breach of that settlement.
That's exactly right, because you are required to have some type of an agreement with that potential buyer.
Right.
Absolutely.
And here you are thinking that you're talking to a real buyer and saying, you know what? Nobody's going to know about it. I'm just going to go and open the door. That person could be from Michael Ketchmark's team.
How many times have we seen this with fair housing?
Absolutely.
where people call and they pose as somebody that wants to rent a house or what have you, and then we learn that it was actually a tester in the marketplace and somebody gets sued, and the buyout on that is extremely expensive. So at the end of the day, the stakes are even higher on this one.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
Can brokers still offer commission to co-brokers?
Absolutely. They
Okay.
can. They can. And they can advertise that on their own listings through really any means outside of the MLS.
Okay.
And to the point that you made earlier, the MLS basically, you agents enter listings into the MLS. The MLS takes those listings and we distribute the listings to the channels that we need to make the market work and the channels that the brokers instruct us to.
Sure.
So with that said, if there is, for instance, a third-party site or a third-party, call it group or whatever, a software or whatever, that is aggregating those commissions, we will cut that feed. We will cut that feed. And because the BeachesMLS, all MLSs are prohibited from participating in that activity. So if a broker has a feed from us, which you all do to power your websites, and you breach that, then we will cut the feed. To that point, brokers are allowed to market and advertise the commission that they are offering on their listings only.
Okay. So you can go ahead and do a post on Facebook and let the community know that, hey, bring your buyers by because we are going to do a co-broker offer of commission.
Yep. Whatever you'd like. Yep.
Flyers, your own company website, things like that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Let's get into that question. So I have my brokerage website is displaying an offer of compensation for a particular listing. Can I go and take the URL for that particular listing that I have on my company website and put that into the broker remarks?
No.
No.
What you can do is under broker remarks, you can put the URL to your website, and maybe you want to point it to your homepage. Maybe you want to point it to contact us. What you cannot point it to is that listing on your website.
That listing.
So the URL cannot go to 123 Main Street, but it certainly could go to your contact us or something, which makes it a little easier for other agents to get a hold of you and inquire about, whatever inquiries they have about the home.
Okay, beautiful. Well, that certainly helps. Let's talk about open houses because we talked about those written agreements. When I am hosting an open house, do I have to have every person who walks in that front door sign a written buyer brokerage agreement or a written buyer agreement of some sort?
No. But what you do have to do is, and the reason that you don't is because when you're holding that open house, you're representing your seller. And so you're holding that open house on behalf of the seller because you are contractually engaged with your seller.
Sure.
And so that's a form of marketing that property on behalf of seller. Now, if a buyer comes in and they want to see the house, you don't have to because, again, you're really working for the seller in that particular moment. But if a buyer were to say, gee, I love this house, I want to talk about making an offer, then you do need to move into a written agreement with that potential buyer. Or if the buyer says, this house isn't really perfect for me, but there's a house next door I'd love to see. Again, now you're going to need to enter into an agreement with that buyer because now you are no longer working on behalf of your seller. You're actually working on behalf of that potential buyer.
Right. Okay. Well, that makes a heck of a lot of sense. Cleared some things up because people did have some confusion thinking that they needed to sign every person up that walks into an open house has to be signed up on a buyer brokerage agreement. Yeah. And just to be crystal clear with everybody, Florida Realtors has put out several different forms. So we do have a pre-touring agreement, we have a showing agreement, we have an exclusive buyer brokerage agreement. Any one of those agreements will suffice in order to have something written with that buyer.
Absolutely.
And they all serve a different purpose. So a pre-touring agreement is, all I want to do is look at the house. I may or may not buy it from you. I'm not agreeing to anything. Okay, so at least you have something tangible, written, signed by the buyer that allows you to go and open up that door. You've got a showing agreement that says, hey, I want to go and see this property, and if I happen to like that property, I'm going to buy it to you, and I'm going to agree to buy that property from you. Then you've got an exclusive buyer brokerage agreement, which basically is now you're going steady with the buyer, and the buyer says, I want to work with you exclusively. Anything that you show me, I agree that I'm buying it from you. Anything that you send me, anything that I find on my own, I agree that you're the one that's working for me. Let's go and find me a property. So you do have different options. If you have some buyers that necessarily don't want to, jump right in and go exclusive with you right off the get-go. You could start them off slow and just keep amending those agreements and upping the terms.
You could baby step as the relationship kind of matures and you begin working more closely together. Absolutely.
Okay, so let's talk about some other questions that we have heard. Commissions in regards to rentals. Are the commissions in regards to rentals going to stay in the MLS, or are those being removed as well?
So the commission from rentals is being removed. Commission throughout the entire MLS is being removed. And again, that goes back to the document that BeachesMLS signed when we opted into the settlement to become part of the settlement. Then we agreed to remove all commissions from the MLS.
Right.
And so that is, rentals throughout the entire MLS.
So variable dual rate commission is going away. Renewable commissions on rentals is going away. Anything that has to do with commissions.
Yep.
Okay.
Anything touching commissions.
Guys, August 13th, do not be surprised when you turn on the MLS or log in and you realize that these fields are gone. We're telling you all about it right now. So what are the benefits of being part of that settlement? I know we've already briefly gone over that, but let's just drive that point home. We're now part of the settlement. What's in it for us?
I think what's in it for us is that, again, those two big lawsuits that we saw in 2019, let alone, and in addition to the 25 plus copycat lawsuits that we saw throughout the nation, the settlement provides what I call clawback coverage on that. So by virtue of being part of that settlement, those lawsuits are not something that you have to worry about. The financial component is taken care of through the NAR settlement. NAR has told us that they're not raising dues 2024 or 2025 in order to meet the financial obligation. So I think certainly getting out from underneath those massive $5.4 billion judgments that just tripled on us is a huge benefit. I also think that there's no reason to believe that the copycat lawsuits would stop at 25. I mean, let's face it, lawsuits are beneficial.
There's lots of money to be made out there.
That's right. There is lots of money. And so as long as one continues to adhere to the requirements in the settlement, they have that protection moving forward as well. So
just play by the rules and you're in the clear.
Play by the rules. Exactly. And one of the things that we see is we have done hundreds of broker office visits at this point, which is a good thing. We're very happy to do that because we're excited that our broker community wants for us to get in front of their agents and talk about this and make certain the agents understand what's going on. But one of the things that we initially saw was agents putting forth a lot of effort in trying to figure out how to do the workaround.
Right.
And we're really encouraging people to don't try to do the workaround. Put your energy into learning how to prosper in this market, because with every opportunity or with every change, there is tremendous opportunity. Some people are really going to thrive in this market.
Big time.
They're going to, buyers are going to buy, sellers are going to sell, agents are going to represent them. So be part of the group that really learns how to do it in the right way, the productive way.
The professional way. Yeah, I think for anybody listening, the biggest takeaway and biggest piece of advice I can give you is stop spending not even a minute of your time trying to find a workaround. Really lean into the changes. And anytime that you are feeling like you might have an idea for a workaround, just go ahead and spin that into really sharpening your buyer presentation. Yeah. We go out there and we spend so much time crafting and adjusting and making sure that we have the most fantastic listing presentation that you've ever seen, so we can walk into a home and come out with that contract. Do the same thing for yourself if you are working with buyers, because we're in a free market society. People can go anywhere they want, negotiate any way they want to, and you really need to stand out in this market and in this new industry that we're leaning into. Really need to go out there and make sure that you've got a fantastic buyer presentation, that when that person walks into your office, they're not leaving without your representation, because they want to know that you're the one that's going to get the job done, and you're going to spend every waking minute trying to find them the best price for the best possible or best home with the best price at the best possible terms, and go out there and get the job done. So do what you're supposed to do. Be professional. Stop trying to skirt around this thing and get creative. I even heard of somebody saying that, we're going to try to do meta tags in our photos when we upload them to the MLS and like all this kind of stuff. I promise you, our artificial intelligence is better than yours.
See it.
We're gonna see it. You're gonna get fined,
and then we're gonna find it. Yeah, and we don't want to find you.
Yeah, we don't want to. We really don't. We're not in the business of finding people, but we are in the business of protecting our membership. Yeah, and we are going to do everything in our power in order to do so. So just so that you guys know, there are going to be fines associated with this. During the first 6 months, if you don't have a written buyer agreement and somebody finds out that you are opening doors without one, you're going to get a warning only for the first 6 months and only one time within that 6-month period. And after that, you're going to get a fine. And then the fine's going to double if you're caught again. And we do have multiple fines, and some of them range into thousands of dollars.
Absolutely. They continue to escalate. Ultimately, we're going to suspend service. I mean, if it gets to the point that somebody is clearly habitual with it, then we're going to have to suspend service at a point.
Don't make cheating a business model. We're going to catch you.
Exactly.
We're going to make it so expensive for you.
Yeah. And I can tell you that with every violation, because again, our goal is not to fine people, it's to educate people.
Absolutely.
So with each and every violation, there is going to be mandatory education.
Legal training.
Yep. Keep it legal class.
Okay. Anything else to add?
I don't think so. No, thank you.
Well, thank you for being with us. Guys, lean into the change. This is a time to not only survive, but thrive. And we all have the ability to do so just as long as we're doing it properly and professionally. And I can't wait to see you on the other side of that closing table. So everyone, be well and don't be scared. Give us a call if you have any questions. We're doing town halls. We're doing broker VIPs. We're pumping out this information as much as we possibly can, so that way you don't have to look hard to find your answers. And there's always facts.realtor.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, with that, everybody have a fantastic day, a great weekend, and we can't wait to see you right back here next time on RWorldTalk.
Thank you.